Hey, it's Karin. Welcome to this episode of A Touch of Genius, your place to get curious about your personal ingenuity and develop your potential. Together, we're going to discover how to break down and break through limitations so we can shine brighter. We'll find out how this helps us create a better life experience wherever we are and explore its far-reaching implications. We'll also be learning more about how someone else's touch of genius impacts us. Get your notebook and cookies ready, and let's dive into this episode. Hello, genius. I hope you're having a good day. Any major sporting event always gives us the opportunity to remember what dedication, commitment, and focus can do for a person, especially when it comes to something they love doing and are good at. It's great when things are working out for us, but what happens when they're not? In this episode, we're going to explore how to see the light through the darkness and come out victorious on the other side of it. We slip and slide up and down Maslow's hierarchy of needs based on our life circumstances, quite often getting stuck at the lower levels of core survival. Survival nowadays looks like spinning your wheels just to get by financially and make a decent living without the bells and whistles. Yet there's another part of society that seems to be booming and making millions, almost without effort. How is this so? I'm not here to talk about socioeconomics today, though. I'm here to talk about how we can translate conscious action and discipline into living from our personal genius, especially when faced with adverse circumstances. We need to remember that the human spirit has a lot of power and grit to overcome obstacles in the name of personal excellence. We need to honor that part of ourselves as we honor it in others. I think it's fair to say that we all love to dream and imagine having certain life experiences or achievements. Dreaming is still free last time I checked. So we can be highly abundant in this domain since our imagination is limitless. Even though the act of dreaming is slowly being beaten out of people because they're being so pulled apart by external circumstances. It sometimes seems like a mammoth task just to get through one day of self-discipline and some sense of purpose. Do you ever feel that way? Obviously, our energy goes wherever our attention goes, and it's up to us to be more conscious and selective about what we give our attention to. This is how high performers succeed in their endeavors. They tune out the things that they know will distract them in order to dedicate themselves to what they set out to accomplish. Most of us were never trained to do this, and our educational systems never really had this concept put in place, except perhaps at a university level. Cramming to pass an exam without someone having first given you a good roadmap to organize your study time with explains a lot of the stress around exam time, for example. Also, if you weren't on a sports team, you probably didn't have someone helping you structure your mind, time, and energy in order to perform at your best on the field. Most of these aspects of personal discipline typically only come when we have clarity on something we want to achieve, and somebody helps us organize ourselves, or we find a way to do it on our own. That's why coaching, for example, is such a useful support mechanism. And I don't just mean sports coaching, I mean personal coaching in general. I'll give you a simple example that gave me insight on how to better discipline myself around a particular dream. It was also my first true incursion into the coaching field, as someone keen on learning about how to improve herself. I had originally written a book manuscript in the year 2000, but it became one of those pieces of writing that ended up in a box, moving around the world with me. At that time, it's as though I channeled that book because it simply came out so quickly. But I got so busy and enchanted by my blossoming SEO career that I stopped writing regularly and put this book on my someday list. It wasn't until I met my first coach almost 10 years later who helped me unblock myself while I reconnected with my intuition. I took that manuscript out of its box, polished it up, and published it. I had been pretty well disciplined in other aspects of my life up until then, and for a time I had developed a certain discipline around playing music. But I was running on the belief that I had to achieve a well-paid career before I could pursue my personal creative interests like writing. Once I began to peel away that belief, I was able to tap into why this book was important to me and what it could potentially help others with as well. I learned to hyper-focus my mind, my emotions, and my actions around achieving this personal goal of mine. I rekindled my dream and made it happen. The book in question became the first Nicky Owl novel, which is an illustrated set of stories in which Nicky explores and adapts to a new life outside of his home territory. I originally intended for this book to reach a young adult audience, but was pleasantly surprised when I received more feedback from people in their late 20s or early 30s who saw themselves reflected in this book because of their own life changes. Remember, your first Saturn return happens when you're around 29 years into this life. The tool I used to help me organize myself around creating this book was a simple SMART goal, or what is also referred to as keys to an achievable outcome. But it was so effective in kicking my emotions into gear, remembering why it was important for me to live my dream of becoming a published author, and this is what eventually led me into the coaching world. I had my personal proof that it worked, and I began to wonder what it would be like to help other people to feel more accomplished in their own lives. A lot has happened in my life since that first book came out, and I've published other books since, without having to use the SMART goal technique, although it still comes in useful from time to time. This is one of many techniques that can help any one of us get into gear and move forward on things that matter to us, even under stress. The key is emotional discipline. Now, many people will say that we shouldn't let our feelings dictate our actions. I think we need a healthy balance of thoughts and emotions, and a good understanding of where these come from. Many times we may feel good about doing something, but we trip ourselves up with a belief, which is just a persistent thought, that holds us back. I'd love to know how easy or difficult it is for you to feel that you can accomplish your personal goals these days. Are you able to filter out the noise, whatever that mental noise may be? What do you find helps you get focused and act on your personal goals? Or are you one of those people who has stopped believing in your own dreams or human potential? I do believe that people, no matter what, have a natural curiosity to explore who they can truly become. This natural curiosity can get suffocated, though, when someone is under a certain pressure to make a living for themselves and have food and dignified shelter. We're living in very delicate times in which things can go any which way at the click of a button. Personally, I'm not comfortable with that. How about you? It can be challenging to develop our highest potential or think about personal dreams in a world that, if we looked at it through a certain type of lens, would seem very dark, scary, pointless, and going nowhere good fast. Why would we bother to be and do our best? Why would we bother to show our kids how to do and be their best? Why build anything of importance if somehow it's going to be destroyed or taken away from us? I'll give you a clue. For the pure soul pleasure of doing so, and because we can't take any of this material stuff with us when we're done here anyway. So why not make the best of it? Whether you believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience on our way to heaven or nirvana, or that we're animals in a food chain who evolved differently from the rest, or that we're some sort of slave race living on a prison planet, these questions about our existence are all valid. They show a deeper sense of being, which drives us to find answers to those questions and others. Why are we here? What is the purpose of us being born, making our way through this life, and then dying? That's what a lot of our geniuses ask themselves too, and they found their own ways to navigate their lives through the things that inspired them. That's where the beauty lies in all of our existence, to get curious about why each one of us is here, and what we can do with our precious time here, even when life circumstances seem to be squeezing the very life out of us. There's nothing more sad than to know someone who is truly living their passion, and even making a good living out of it, gives it up just to do what everyone else expects them to do. I've witnessed this up close, and it's a slow path to a sad ending. As Dr. Wayne Dyer used to say, don't die with your music still in you. We've become so conditioned to putting our focus on having to do what is expected of us, whether it's family commitments, friend group, government, or society at large. The systems we have in place tend to suffocate the true essence of most people, unless they're given a chance early on to explore and strengthen their core interests. Some people blossom later on in life, though, having woken up and broken free from the restraints that held them back. But too many people, forced by external circumstances, put up their hands and steer off their bigger life purpose. Most of the people that we look back upon as geniuses also lived through tense situations of their own. Whether these were unhealthy relationships, ill health, financial stress, wars, or other kinds of conflicts, they somehow found a way to carry on regardless, whether it was by themselves or with the help of other people. They were, after all, human beings too, dealing with pretty much the same core concerns we deal with today. History is loaded with examples of people who died for thinking differently. It's also loaded with examples of people who were forced out by the societies and people that they tried to help. Maria Montessori had the help of her son to carry on developing her work in education, even though she went into exile after increasing oppression by the Italian regime at the time. Albert Einstein took exile in the US so that he could carry on with his research, forced out under increasing pressure from the German regime before World War II. Pablo Picasso went into exile after strong opposition to Franco's post-Civil War regime in Spain, and sat through the consequent German occupation of France during World War II. He persisted with his artistic creations nonetheless, as a means to express his anger and upset. Even though these and other renowned geniuses chose to extract themselves from places of conflict, not all of them did so. Amid chaos and strife, they chose to focus as much of their time, energy, and resources on the very things that gave them life, until their lives were taken from them. Federico García Lorca, renowned Spanish poet of the early 20th century, was shot like many others by the nationalist forces at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War. He was one of many other examples of creators who chose to stay where the conflict was and stand up for what they believed in, even if it meant their ultimate death. However their lives ended, all of these creators left us a great legacy. The very things that we now get to admire, appreciate, and learn from were created amid some level of stress and chaos. That said, it doesn't mean that we always have to create from stress, pain, or suffering. Diamonds may be created out of high pressure, but trees grow naturally with adequate sunlight and rain. As children, we are applauded for creating with joy, but somewhere along the lines into adulthood, this changes and we instead get applauded for creating through suffering. Why is this? Look how much they had to go through to get where they are, people say, when someone finally achieves a dream. When and why did we choose to become martyrs like this? If you're stuck in the idea of having to suffer in order to achieve something, I would strongly encourage you to look at your upbringing, spanning from your family belief system to your cultural and even your spiritual belief systems. Question the narratives you were raised with and start to correlate how any of them may be impacting your pursuit of your personal excellence. The thing is, as children, we typically have no real concept of creating from pain. We paint and draw and make stuff from a place of pure joy. It's only later, based on other people's belief systems that filter into our minds, that we begin to correlate achievement with suffering and struggle. We start to assign financial value to our actions, and without realizing it, we start to limit our choices. We let fear seep in and condition our actions and behaviors. I too had fallen into that mental trap, and it's a tricky one to get out of. I had to remember that we can also create from joy, that I was doing so as a child before all these beliefs started to take shape. I just didn't seem to get the message strong enough to anchor it in. You probably were creating from joy as well, but you didn't notice. Then life and growing responsibilities took over your focus and suffocated your creative thinking. It dampened your ability to create from joy and instead create through struggle. When you start to pay attention to your emotional state and what you create, you will find it more fulfilling to create from a state of joy than from a state of struggle. Now, when you're feeling heartbroken after a relationship breakup, for example, it's normal, if you're a creative sort of person, to channel your energy and emotions through your art, whether it's writing, painting, singing, dancing, or music. It's natural to pour out our feelings into these outlets. And because we're feeling such high sensitivity through whatever loss or discomfort, we can actually create some of our best work. Even people who wouldn't normally consider themselves creative or artistic can end up writing the most beautiful poems or songs after a breakup, because they feel so much. But please do not get attached to that idea, because you could get caught up in negative behaviors just to keep creating. We can and do create some of our best work from a state of joy. By channeling the energy of love and such higher emotional frequencies, we're also able to create magnificent work. We have other creative geniuses to thank, because otherwise we wouldn't have masterpieces that were created by tapping into the sheer beauty of life. What if you created your next business from that energy and followed through with it, and doing away with the beliefs that in order to succeed, you need to struggle? It's not that we have to be in one state or another to create. We can respect our personal flow and let ourselves tap into that limitless energy so we can channel our emotions through these different creative outlets that we have. When I refer to stress and chaos, I'm not referring to the type of stress that someone may be experiencing in a highly conflicted, war-torn area. It's obviously hard for anyone to feel good in any sort of violent surroundings that they're struggling to survive through, even though some people still manage to find something positive, even if it's simply that they have lived one more day. These are extreme scenarios that inevitably shift a person's focus to urgent survival and protection. The kind of stress I'm talking about here is the one we can more easily choose to dissipate, whether it's at work, in our family, intimate relationship, local community, or how we view the world. To consistently create from a place of feeling good, we need to consistently focus on this energy, even though we will always have to deal with contrast and sort through the things that feel good and logical to us and those that don't. If we keep derailing ourselves or let other circumstances distract us, then it's no surprise if we don't get to complete anything we set out to accomplish. It can definitely seem more challenging nowadays because we have so many responsibilities and distractions. Unless you live in some rural area and/or you have highly disciplined yourself to limit your use of technology, then you're probably also struggling with what to give your attention to. I miss those days when we had only a handful of channels on TV and our downtime was dedicated to play, reading, biking, or creating things. But with some conscious effort, one can still live that way. One can still reclaim their personal sovereignty, even amid the super-enhanced bread and circuses. In ancient Rome, bread and circuses was a metaphor for the way that the ruling class kept the masses happy and appeased. This phrase is attributed to Juvenal, who is a Roman poet of the late 1st and early 2nd century AD. In a political context, the phrase means to generate public approval through diversion, distraction, or by satisfying the most immediate or basic requirements of a populace by offering a palliative, for example, bread, food, or circuses, entertainment. Juvenal originally used this phrase to criticize the selfishness of common people, and how they neglected broader concerns. This phrase implies a population's decay or ignorance of civic duty as a priority. How much of this are we still experiencing today? Civic duty almost sounds like a very distant concept at this point, doesn't it? I'm curious to get a feel for what's going on where you live when it comes to civic responsibility among adults and youth. What would you like to see more of and different? Those circuses, or entertainment, have evolved a lot over the centuries, spawning into multiple sports, movies, TV shows, musical events, social media, and so on. Add to this idea of entertainment the surge of ideological injections we're faced with, and people have a harder time thinking straight about their own lives without fear of stepping on someone else's toes or of being pitted against one another. This is another form of stress that can deter us from our ability to create and self-actualize. It was in Aesop's fable, The Four Oxen and the Lion, that a very well-known phrase was first coined. The fable goes like this. A lion used to prowl about a field in which 4 oxen used to dwell. Many a time he tried to attack them, but whenever he came near, they turned their tails to warn another, so that whichever way he approached them, he was met by the horns of one of them. At last, however, they fell a-quarreling among themselves, and each went off to pasture alone in the separate corner of the field. Then the lion attacked them one by one, and soon made an end of all 4. United we stand, divided we fall. I know it can seem challenging to find unity these days, yet when we get to the heart of what we all seek, which is love, respect, kindness, harmony, fulfillment, we can begin to expand our actions from this place. But if we don't take that first step, the lion will eat us all. Let's all put our thinking caps on, look around, and open up conversations to weave our rich tapestry together again. We actually have so much more to agree on than to disagree on, but we need to have the courage to do so. The very, very first step, though, is knowing who you are. What makes you tick? What are your values? How do you live them? Do you know how to express yourself clearly? And can you practice active listening with the people around you, even if you disagree on some things? If you don't have that self-awareness, any metaphorical lion can come along and devour you, starting with your own attitude towards life. In the coaching and educational fields, attitude comes up a lot, whether it's an adult's attitude around their approach to business or relationship, or a child's attitude towards taking responsibility for their actions. It's one of those things you can't avoid because it permeates everything you do. Without the appropriate attitude, you can let yourself fall flat on your own goals. What is your core attitude when things get tough? How do you overcome adversity in your life? Taking back our mental focus is key. With the kind of technology we have access to at a personal level, people also want instant results without the daily commitment to get somewhere. This has been one of the key components in destroying people's attitudes. Besides putting in time and energy into what they've built for themselves, every artist, writer, athlete, and business person also worked on their attitude. Their success usually didn't happen overnight because there was some sort of groundwork that paved their way to a pivotal moment. In a world where instant gratification has taken over the attitudes of so many youth, it's no surprise when some of them can't handle simple setbacks, whether it's a low grade, not being accepted on a team, being rejected by a potential love interest, or not knowing how to solve a problem. And it's not just up to the teachers to help them improve their attitude, because attitude is taught first at home. Let's remember that from 0 to 6 years old, a child is soaking up everything that goes on around them. So before a child even goes to kindergarten or anything, they're taking in their caregivers' attitudes and behaviors without being consciously aware of it. The subconscious mind, which is where our deep programming resides, is taking in this information and starting to build a mental map to go by. So when they're a little bit older, meaning kids can talk and reason, and perhaps they display a negative attitude towards things, that's when parents need to take a step back and do some introspection, without judging themselves. Is it possible that they may have displayed a negative attitude that was informing their children on what sort of attitude to display later on? Remember, children learn more from what they see than from what is said. Let's all take a closer look at our core attitudes and how these may play into our family dynamics, or our relationships, or our work situations. Consider as well the media you consume, and what you let your kids consume, and how these influence your attitudes. Attitude will determine your altitude, so if you want to fly high in life, or achieve the best that you can, you're going to need to check your attitude. So guess what? We're going to do a genius little exercise on attitude, also downloadable from the show notes and this episode's entry on my website. What is your attitude regarding relationships? You can separate this into intimate relationship, whether you have a partner or not, friends, and family. What is your attitude regarding work or career? What is your attitude regarding money and abundance? What is your attitude regarding your health and well-being? What is your attitude regarding society? What is your attitude towards spirituality and personal development? How can you take steps to improve your attitude in any of these areas if you notice that you could do better? To live our best life and step into our personal excellence, we need to silence the noise around us and inside us. We also need to show children how to do that so that they don't become another version of what has led many parts of the world to constant conflict, greed, dehumanization, pain, and suffering. By doing this ourselves and showing this type of emotional leadership, we show children around us what possibility can look like for them. To inspire others, we need to be inspired ourselves. And I know it can be hard in a world that just seems so conditioned and bent on keeping us down and out. So here's my encouragement and big ask for you to dedicate time to think of how you could potentially live out your own passions. I know people might say, but we can't all live off our passions. But what if you could? Or what if you can use your passions as an inspiration for the work that you do? You see, we're told to live this linear process of life. Study, work, multiply, retire, die. But what if our whole reason for existence was to experience our fullest potential? What if by doing this we were able to contribute to other people's lives and personal potential? When we talk about conscious creation, what we're talking about is listening to yourself, clearing out the mind chatter and everybody else's chatter, and from that place of inner clarity, extending your ideas and your actions into your physical reality. Sometimes it feels really challenging because there's so much to deal with, and that's where the stressors can block us from feeling our most creative self. Most people have already been conditioned to live from the outside in, meaning that whatever they see is going on outside of them, they have to constantly react to. But when we're in a conscious place and state of being, we're more able to respond to what's going on by thinking through our actions before taking them on impulse. That's where we get to create a different reality from the inside out. In the words of Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu, the greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Think of this the next time you set yourself up for self-sabotage, or think about giving up on your dreams because things seem too hard and challenging. And remember, each one of us was born to bring more light into this world, but it only works if you're willing to explore what yours is and share it with the rest of us. And trust me, we can always find things to stress over, but isn't it nicer to find things that fuel our joy? Stay strong, kind, curious, and loving. As we wrap up today's show, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. It means a lot to me. You see, whenever we create something, we always take a leap of faith into the unknown, and we don't always know how it'll work out. That's part of what this podcast is about, encouraging all of us to take leaps of faith on our ideas, dreams, and creations, and having a safe space to explore them, to build the strength to get back up when we fall, and to celebrate when we fly high. I'd love to know what your big takeaway is from this episode. Tell me what you're working through and what you'd like to know more about. Also, is there someone you'd like me to interview on the topic of genius? Let me know. Email me at hello@karinpinter.com or message me on my socials. In the meantime, take care of your genius self.